Today, my guest is Kerry Cullen. Kerry is focused on supporting people to remember their resources as they face into life's challenges. During her 20-year career as a chartered psychologist, she has weaved multiple modalities into her practice: psychology, embodiment, neuroscience, and Celtic methodology, so that she can stand taller in her gift of being an integrator, at her happiest when she sees people coming home a little more to who they truly are. She has worked across a huge variety of sectors and organisations: the Royal College of Surgeons, Bristol Myers Squibb, AIB, Deloitte and IBEC, in addition to being trained by some of the world's foremost thought leaders: Dr. Mike Smith, Anthony Grant, Doug Silsby and Nancy Kine. This is a wonderfully grounded conversation. Enjoy. Kerry, massive welcome to the Excitable Soul Podcast. Just wonderful to have you here with us and to be able to get in conversation with you. You know, the very name, the Excitable Soul, you know, yours is a wonderful soul, and to be able to get our listeners, our audience, to explore a little bit of that is going to be magical, I know. So thank you so much for being with us.
And thank you for having me on. I'm delighted to be here and really looking forward to our conversation. So thank you.
So I guess meaningfulness just oozes out of you, Kerry. And, you know, you can spend 5 minutes in conversation with you and know that you've been really intentional, really purposeful about trying to understand what matters to you in your life and to be able to do work and live a life that feels connected to things that are significant and really purposeful. And I'd just like to start by kind of, I guess, connecting the dots, going backwards and understanding a little bit about how you've uncovered some of that for yourself. You know, are there moments, people that have just really shaped who you are? Like, how have you made sense of all of that meaning for yourself?
That's a big question.
Oh, yeah, always.
Let's just get right in there, James. Yeah, great question. I mean, there's loads of stuff that comes up when you ask that. You know, I think I always knew that I wanted to do psychology. So, you know, it was kind of always within me that was something I wanted to do. Yeah. But then I didn't get the grades. And
damn those universities and their entry levels.
Yeah. So I didn't have the points that I needed. But I knew this is what I'm going to do. Like, I'm going to go to do psychology in Coleraine in Northern Ireland, but I hadn't got in. This was one moment that really shaped my life, because it was like, but I'm doing it, even though I've not got in. This is my path. Yeah. So I like pestered the bejesus out of the university, and I like rang them every day. And I even went and camped outside the professor's office until they let me in.
Okay, give the crazy lady the opportunity of joining the university. She's not going anywhere.
Yeah,
but amazing.
Yeah,
so, right. Already in that, like, there's just my mind. The curiosity is like. Yeah. So what was it? Where did the compulsion come from? Like, there must have been something burning so deeply in you to go and be then willing to, you know, camp on the street to go to the university. What was driving that? Where did that come from?
Yeah, I don't know. It's just like this deep feeling that was just what I was doing. You know, I didn't have a plan B for that year. You know, that was what I was doing, and that was it. You know. So it was just like, there isn't another option. This is what I'm doing, you know.
Yeah, wow.
And there was just such clarity. And sometimes, if I'm honest, I look back and go, God, I wish I could have that clarity in other situations, if I'm honest. Because, you know, sometimes it's there really strongly and sometimes it's not, right, you know.
Yeah, of course.
But that was a really strong moment for me. And then when I got on the course, I ended up doing really well. And I ended up getting a placement where I went off and I worked in the Caribbean for a year, which was amazing. Yeah. And I remember them trying to find me in the register, one of my tutors, and she goes, I can't find you anywhere. And I went, oh, that's because I came in that back door through this, you know, this. And she was like totally shocked. And she went, really? I was like, yeah, that's how I got here, you know.
Yeah.
So that's one one experience that really that I sometimes remind myself of, that, even when things aren't aligning, if you feel really strongly about it, just go for it.
Yeah, there's real magic in that, Kerry, isn't there? And like
Mm.
you had a feeling, and it's one of
Yeah.
the things that we try to really underline in these conversations in this podcast, that a sense of purpose is a feeling.
Yeah.
And actually, there is just so much rich data that
Mm.
comes from our emotional experience,
Mm.
and um, that that depth of intuition. That if we can trust that, often good things happen. And for
Yeah.
you to learn that in that moment of no, no, there is no plan B. I'm committed. I'm going. What was the reaction of your parents, for example, about she's off to Northern Ireland?
Well, I'd actually moved to Ireland the year before, when
Yeah,
I decided I was taking a year out. So I just turned 18. So I'd taken this year out, and I was meant to go to Canada and do voluntary work. That
yeah,
all fell through. So I actually ended up going to Ireland for this year, which is partly why I did so badly then, because I was like, I remember I was selling potatoes, and I just had real fun when I was there.
yeah,
And before I'd gone, I'd been this kind of quite serious teenager, and I was
yeah,
almost too old, if you know what I mean.
yeah, yeah,
So when I went there, I just really came into my own, and it's like I rebalanced, having some of that fun, which I hadn't had as a teenager.
yeah.
So not much study.
Yeah, amazing. I love that. We're talking about this kind of deep sense of intuition about the kind of the future and where you're going. Basically, what you're saying, Kerry, is you went on the lash for a year. You didn't get the grades.
Something like that. But I
I love
needed
it.
it, James. I needed to rebalance.
Yeah, of course. It's all about expenditure and recovery of energy, right?
Yeah.
So how did that and those experiences then start to kind of shape future experiences?
Yeah.
How do you connect the dots in the sense making around that?
Yeah. Well, I think that, that feeling of just knowing, when you, as you said, that purpose is a feeling. So I think it helped to then trust, when that feeling comes up, that it's something that needs to be listened to and needs to be honored,
Yeah,
even when it logically doesn't make much sense, and
yeah,
even when there's consequence.
yeah,
So if I give you another example of that, if I fast forward, and then I set up my own business after, when I left university, and set up this consultancy firm. And then, kind of in my early 30s, I've got two small boys, and I'm running this consultancy, and it's going very well. If
yeah,
we, if I look at it in terms of the clients I was getting and the projects I was getting. And around that time, I also then started training as a yoga teacher. So
yeah,
once a month, I'd go, and, we're doing this kind of deeper work where you're connecting with yourself.
yeah,
So I'm on one of these retreat weekends, and I remember having this thought, and the thought was, I really need somebody really good, like a mother, to look after the kids,
yeah,
so I can go and do all of this amazing work.
yeah, yeah,
And I just literally got this bolt up through my body, and it was like, yeah, that's you,
yeah,
you know?
yeah,
And it was so powerful. And I think I'd got lost in my priorities of,
yeah,
I was putting too much into my work and not enough into being a mother. And that's not to say there's plenty of working mothers who get that balance really well.
yeah, yeah,
At the time, I hadn't. And that was just such a strong feeling. And I knew I actually needed to step back from work for a little while,
yeah,
so I could rebalance things. Um, so that was, and of course, and there's consequence in that then too. But it was so strong. It was like,
yeah.
I need to do this.
And can you talk a little about the kind of the consequence element? Because again, Kerry, what you're already beautifully doing is people have this kind of almost idealized um, image of, oh yeah, living a purposeful life means like I'm in some kind of utopian dream of everything
Yeah.
is light and fluffy and happy, and actually the power of purpose is it helps you understand suffering.
Yeah.
so
Yeah.
you can be in pain but understand it. So can you talk a little about the kind of the consequence of those choices, like what that bolt of understanding then meant for you?
Yeah. Yeah. Well, it was really interesting because I did actually have a bit of this utopia idea, just exactly what you've described. Because I was like, well, this feeling is so strong
Yeah.
that I really need to do this. So, I'm going to be this stay-at-home mom, and I'm going to be baking muffins, and this kind of idea of and it's just going to be so beautiful, and I'm going to be so happy, and
Yeah.
this is what I've been missing,
Yeah.
and it just wasn't that way. It
Yeah.
was really wonderful in some ways, to be able to be with them for that period of time. But actually, what I had to meet was a loss of identity,
Yeah.
because
Wow.
I was all of a sudden, I wasn't a psychologist
Yeah.
anymore. And even more interesting was I wasn't earning as much money anymore.
Yeah.
I was earning very little money, and it made me face up to this reality that my sense of self-worth was tied up with the amount of money I was earning. Now, that
Yes.
was a
Yeah.
painful one,
Yeah.
because you don't really want to look at that, but there was truth in that, and that was just through my programming, whatever, but that was true.
Yeah. And so what did that represent to you then? What did the kind of the earning of the money represent when you were talking about self-worth is connected to it? Yeah, what was the representation for you?
I guess, well, it was I suppose it's the money, but also the appreciation of your work, or, the
Yes.
reinforcement. So it's just
Yes.
that sense of you're doing a good job.
Yes.
So, but that was very powerful because it made me unpick that and become less attached to that.
Yeah, amazing.
In having to lose that, I had to actually find a sense of self-worth that wasn't connected to that. So it,
Yeah.
it made me let go of that story,
Yeah.
and yeah, rethink, well, what is success, and what really matters. And so it was painful, but also a very good journey to have to look at identity and
Yeah.
what is identity.
So
So
could you talk a little bit to us about that? Because I can imagine that there are people sat there going, okay, how has she made that shift? Like that, she's just made that sound really easy. Yes, there was a little bit of consequence, but she's now reframed her sense of self worth, and it comes from a place that feels more meaningful. What did that reframing, reshaping of your identity look like?
well, Michael Singer talks about in his book The Untethered Soul, he talks something like about how we put our hand in a glove,
Yeah.
and the hand in the glove is, that's our identities that we attach to.
Yeah.
So, I think some of that is taking the hand out of the glove and then actually looking at ourselves. Um, so it's a really good question. I'm trying to reflect and think about it. I think it was a slow process. I know that sounds really quick,
Yeah.
and I also think actually it's one that spirals, and I've been around several times as well, if that makes sense,
Yeah. Of course. Yeah. Of course.
Um, so I think that was a layer of self-worth going through that journey. And then another layer and another spiral of self-worth was when I was told about 5 years ago that I needed to have brain surgery, which
Yeah.
didn't come to pass, thank God.
Yeah.
Um, but that was really helpful because it was like, oh God, what is the point putting all this energy into self-doubt?
Yeah.
you know?
Okay. Wow. Yeah. Can you? Yeah. Just talk us through that experience, because that's, you wear it so lightly in your description, but I can only imagine what it's like when you're sat there with medical professionals who are saying, "Hey, we found this thing in your brain,
Yeah.
and there's a chance we might need to operate."
Mhm.
The outcome of that for you has been, "I'm letting go of self doubt." Connect those dots for us.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, well, I mean, it is. You sat there and you get this news, and at that stage, the news was we do need to do brain surgery. So it is terrifying,
Yeah.
and I just remember there was kind of that terror and that fear, and the biggest fear was what if I'm not here for the kids?
Yeah.
That was the biggest fear with that. And there was yeah, it was felt quite overwhelming, and
Yeah.
and also very humbling, because it brought me into a place of realizing that actually I needed other people
Yeah.
For me to feel okay around that time, I really needed other people to be able to help me, feel
Yeah.
okay. And so that was humbling.
Yeah.
So there's that side. And then also alongside of that is this real firm kick up the ass, to be honest, in terms of, well, if you've only got however many years to live, you better bloody get on with it.
Yeah. Yeah. Amazing.
And and you're wasting energy on this self-doubt. So that journey, I don't think it's a case of that, I let go of the identity of a psychologist and all of a sudden I didn't have self-doubt. That
Yeah.
wouldn't be
No.
true
Yeah.
for me to say. But I lost some of it. And then that has been a journey that that I continue to work with.
Yeah.
But I think, in Celtic philosophy, they talk a lot about the spirit of our death.
Yeah.
In both and death is so scary, for a lot of us. And there's
Yeah.
also a great gift in actually when we face into the impermanency of things,
Yes. Yeah.
that it can say, well, what really matters. So that also came along at that time, of really making me sit with that and think. And it also made me braver with my work in terms of
Yeah.
my offering. I got more authentic with it, I think,
Yeah.
because it was like, well, may as well just get on with it.
Yeah. Yeah. And the you know what's the kind of the power of the message, Kerry, really about the kind of the scariness of the kind of finite nature of life,
Mm,
but actually how that can shape a perspective when you kind of just really embrace the reality.
mm.
There's that kind of comedic phrase, isn't there? None of us are getting out of this one alive, and but you're like, don't say that out loud. Like,
Yeah.
why would you do that? Why would you talk about it? When
Mm,
in reality, if we start to acknowledge that, what what can it make possible? When you
mhm,
start to think in those terms, rather than kind of fearing that, you say, well, what where am I focused? Where is my energy going? What am I
mm.
embracing in
Yeah.
this moment? And the fact that part of the outcome of that for you was being able to feel brave
Mm.
in how you go to work to help others.
Yeah.
Like that's again. And I just wanted to go back one step, if that was okay, when you talked about the kind of the humbling nature of knowing that you needed others in
Yeah.
order to feel okay about that
Yeah.
moment. Who were the others? Who were, when you became aware of that, who were
Yeah.
the people that you saw around you that you were going, okay, you are the anchors here for me?
Yeah, yeah. Well, definitely my husband David, who's very grounded. So he was brilliant in terms of being able to, look at the medical data that I didn't end up spending loads of time on Google. So
Yeah.
so he was a really good anchor. And then my family and friends, so like my parents and my siblings, and then friends, and then also some people in my professional life.
Yeah.
For example, I remember spending a day with Nancy Klein, who
Yeah. Yeah.
talks about her own health issues, and that was very helpful, just to actually be able to see some possibility, to be able to move out of the fear
Yeah.
and actually find some curiosity. So I think, yeah, so I was lucky to have good people around me, but
Yeah.
it was humbling that when you're experiencing something like that, um, you need other people. I think it's David White talks about how when I'm going to misquote him now, so but something like when things like this happen, it puts us into right relationship because we have to ask for help.
Yeah. And you gave me one of the best pieces of parenting advice ever, which is you just said, look, it takes a village. It takes a village. And when I think about the relationship of self to others, or kind of individual to community, just the tribal nature of our species,
Mm.
um, is always kind of reconfirmed in that moment. Like, we aren't any good on our own, full
No.
stop. And
Mm.
again, when you think about what purpose really is, when you kind of break it down to its key mechanisms, it's meaningfulness
Mm.
and contribution.
Yeah.
And it's about something that's beyond your own self-interest. So in those moments of fear
Mm.
and and genuine worry, there's something about how and where do I find meaning in this, and who are the people around me
Mm.
in order
Yeah,
to enable me to do that.
yeah, yeah, yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
the magic of others, and I think that's often forgotten, in the way in which we live our lives these
Mm,
days. That if you really just think about, and I was listening to a podcast actually where they just simply said, if you're trying to be, that they were quoting some research actually about
mm,
happiness,
yeah.
and how they'd done research studies in 4 different countries. There was Japan, the US, 2 countries in like Central Europe. I think one of them was Germany, and I can't remember the other. And they looked at a population of people where they really encouraged them to invest in and discover what made them happy.
Mm,
And they found that in the US, when people really pursued happiness, their actual level of happiness went down. And in the other 3 countries, when they pursued happiness, they went up. And there was one variable between the two, which is that in the other 3 countries, when they pursued happiness, it was about impact on others. How do I serve others? Whereas
mm,
in the US, it was, what do I need?
mm,
And they weren't reconciling who am I and what do I need with what do I bring to other people. And so again, it's just a kind of
mm,
a reaffirmation of that's who we are, isn't it?
mm, mm, mm. That's a powerful piece of research, isn't it? You
It
know,
really is, isn't
yeah, yeah,
it?
yeah,
So,
yeah.
you talked about this idea of kind of identity and self-worth, and in the
Mm,
work that we do at the Excitable Soul, the number one aim is to help people really feel enough. And
mm.
I'm wondering, you know, what are your strongest influences on self-worth now, Kerry, and how did you become aware of them?
Oh, that's a good question. Um, I think probably in actually reframing some of my thinking. So, for example, if we talk about courage and think about courage,
Yeah,
you know, we can have, which is linked to self worth to me. What are we being courageous about? And I think I would have had this idea of courage having to be this big grandiose, act,
yeah. Yeah.
and
Diving in the way of the arrow to save, the family member. Yeah.
yeah, that has to be big and
Yeah.
you know. And I love poetry. Really helps me to reframe things and to think about things differently. And there was one piece that David White again wrote about this, and I'll read you a little bit of it actually, because he says the measure so he's talking about courage, and he says the
Yeah.
measure of our heartfelt participation with life, with another, with a community, a work, a future. To be courageous is not necessarily to go anywhere or do anything, except to make conscious those things we already feel deeply, and then to live through the unending vulnerability of those consequences.
Beautiful.
Yeah. So and when I let that land, that really helps me to think about, a short version of that is courage is really living close to what's in your heart.
Yes. Yeah.
What are you actually feeling? But that doesn't mean then, if we look at that from self-worth, that you always have to feel like it's working out then, do you
Yeah.
know?
Yeah.
Or
Yeah.
it doesn't have to be this linear path.
Yeah.
All we have to do is just stay close to what we're really feeling.
Yeah.
So that really helps me then think about, it doesn't always matter what it looks like, and it might not always make sense, but are you staying close to those feelings? And he says a little bit more about that to be courageous is to seat our feelings deeply in the body and in the world, and to live up and into the necessity of relationships that often already exist.
Yeah. I love the kind of the emphasis of his language, where he's really talking about the things that are already there,
Yeah,
and actually the investment in those things, seeing those things.
yeah,
And how many people have we both worked with where it's taken almost a traumatic event, like, for brain surgery,
Mhm.
or the potential for brain surgery, for example, for people to almost lift their head up and look around and
Yeah,
go, what is important to
yeah,
me here? How close am I to those things?
yeah,
And one
mm,
of the great shames I think that we share in working with people that are having those experiences is you didn't need to get to this point. And almost his words are just trying to say,
mm,
are you aware? Do you know? Do you understand what is really important to you, regardless of what that is?
mm, mm,
And what level of investment are you making, putting in to those things when you're clear on it, regardless of fear that you may have? And
yeah.
that's not to dismiss the fear, but
No,
it's to acknowledge that that's part of it.
yeah,
And actually, the fear, to your point, if I'm staying close to my feeling, the fear is telling you something.
yeah,
There's information here.
mm,
There is insight here. What
mm,
is it? What's the insight?
mm,
Because I
mm.
probably need to access it, utilize it in some way.
Yeah, yeah,
And,
yeah, mm,
and so you talked there about my questions really around how have you started to
mm,
anchor kind of self-worth,
mm,
and what are some of the experiences that have really helped shape that. And so I'm hearing a bit that courage is almost a value that you hold, where and how am I being courageous, and what does that look like, and the kind of utilizing poetry as a way to be able to access and make sense
mm,
of that. Are there other examples for you
yeah,
around where and how you make sense of where
yeah,
you find worth?
yeah.
Um,
What's been really helpful for me over the last number of years is studying Celtic mythology and understanding more about cycles.
yeah,
And that has been very helpful to me. So, for example, in Celtic mythology, they would say that when we're born, that, you know, we come into this world and then our soul is fragmented and that it has to fragment, that, it's part of the journey. So we come in and we know exactly what we're about, but then there has to be this fragmentation. So then the journey then is around actually rediscovering and reclaiming those parts of ourselves. So like you said, that it's already there, it's
yeah,
already within us.
yeah,
So I found that very helpful, that it's like, well, it's okay. We're all going to feel lost sometimes,
yeah,
that's part of the journey. And I think to know purpose, we also have to know what it's like to not actually feel like we have any purpose.
yes,
We've
for
got to
sure.
know both sides.
Yeah,
So I find that really helpful, that, and also to think of it in cycles, that we can be just around the corner from getting loads of clarity.
yeah,
Hang in there.
yeah, yeah.
You know,
And and also, like, what you're making me kind of picture in my mind is this sense of it's never done, but in
yeah,
a really good way. So,
yeah,
the idea of it never being done is like, there's a part of it going, well, God, that's exhausting. If I'm putting in all of this effort and I never get there, like, what's the point? But actually, every cycle,
yeah,
you are you are growing, you are learning, you are
yeah,
changing, you are
yeah.
seeing more. But it's not done because you don't know what's coming next.
No, yeah,
And
yeah,
that almost the fact that the kind of the nature of purpose allows you to kind of go into that unknown, or is pulling you into that unknown.
yeah,
Oh, we're going again. What
yeah,
might it mean this time? What might be
yeah.
possible here? What could I see and experience?
Yeah, absolutely. And that can feel uncomfortable too, right? Because we can reach that point of, oh, I feel really focused and I'm really feeling on purpose,
Yeah.
And then you can, like in my own experience, can start to get a feeling, actually it's time to let this go now.
Yes.
You know,
Yeah. Yeah. Wow.
and that can be really hard to honor. Like I know for myself, we launched a program last year around polyvagal for coaches,
Yeah.
which polyvagal theory, if people haven't come across it, is well worth looking up. It's Stephen Porges's theory. So we launched this last year, which went incredibly well. And then I just got this feeling then, actually now that's enough. That's time to let that go and leave space for other stuff.
Yeah.
That was very difficult to do
Yeah.
because
Yeah. Yeah.
it made no logical sense. It was like, well, you've built this up and, it's got momentum. You've built the program, um, but it was this feeling again. It was like, no, it's time to let that go now. And
Yeah.
then to live with the consequence of that, of actually letting it go, you know.
Yeah. And what's really coming through strongly for me, Kerry, in this conversation is you are talking about consequence, right? Repeatedly talking about consequence, awareness of consequence, and more importantly, ownership of
Yeah.
consequence.
Yeah.
And I think there's something really important for us maybe just to spend a moment on, which is
Yeah.
that level of accountability in this process. It's not
Yeah.
like you're looking to anybody else here to kind of validate that. You're acknowledging the choices that you're making and owning them.
Yeah.
How has that become true for you? How have you been able to create a level of comfort with that discomfort?
Yeah. I suppose it's that feeling of, we'll ignore that intuition at your peril. You know,
Yeah,
like,
yeah, yeah,
if that, you know, if that feeling is there, you know, and you know, you really know, and we often do know, right, what
yeah,
actually is calling us, but there's part of us that wants to, you know, ignore that or put it away, you know, if it
yeah,
feels uncomfortable. So I think it's that sense of trusting what's, you know, trusting that feeling of, actually, this is what I need to do, even though it feels uncomfortable, and even though I now have to have some courageous conversations, you know,
yeah.
that just feels like it's the right thing to do.
And again, if if I'm thinking about maybe some people who are listening and kind of really wrestling with, the kind of the nature of our conversation. You and I use the word feeling every third word in
Yeah.
every sentence, and for some people, they don't talk like that. They don't spend that time having those types of conversations, and actually, the wrestle that you're describing here, trust is a feeling.
Yeah.
Certainty is a feeling. And I guess what we're really trying to shine a light on here is that we over index massively on like cognitive, rational, logical thinking, where we're trying to create certainty because we
Yeah.
want control,
Yeah.
because we're actually, guess what, fearful to some degree, which is another emotion. So
Yeah.
we're kind of trying to offset some feelings that we're not paying attention to by over indexing on a whole set of cognitive processes that ultimately don't get us to the answer anyway. It's just effort that's kind of misplaced.
Yeah.
And I guess I'm almost looking for kind of validation from you, if anything, that what we're trying to really kind of uncover and show to people is that there is another way, and that
Mm.
other way requires some courage, because actually when you tap into it and you pay attention to it and you make decisions based on it, you will then start to see, oh wow, there's something in this. And the more that you do it, the more that you are able to trust it, because more you will be able to feel that information is just as valid as other information, and
Yeah.
that then starts to create a different type of certainty, right?
Yeah. Yeah. And I think to be able to do that, we need to give ourselves some spaciousness.
Yes.
So I think it can be really challenging, you know, when we're going fast and we've a lot of tasks that we're trying to do, and you know, and we're focused on trying to get stuff done. Um, and it's harder to hear then that kind of that knowing that you have, because it's easy, you know, it's just harder to hear it when we're going faster, you know.
Yeah.
So I think it does require some spaciousness in whatever, you know, be that you're out in nature or whatever that means to you, but it requires, yeah, a bit of spaciousness, which
You,
is we
you
have to
literally
create.
just stopped me in my tracks by saying spaciousness, because the conversation that we had before we started to record this, you were just asking me how I was, and I was like, oh, I'm meshing the gears right now in between, kind of holiday and time with family and kids, and kind of work, and I'm sat here going, I'm in the struggle right now. I'm definitely going fast.
Yeah,
I'm
yeah,
definitely going fast, and it's the exact opposite of what I need right now in this moment. And so I think this is the wonderful thing about other people and being able to get in conversations, is that you can be triggered really quickly into, oh yeah, hey, I'm aware of this stuff, but actually the speed and the pace has caught me in this moment,
Yeah.
and I need to just check myself.
Yeah. And in our humanness, that's what we do, right? So I think that's the thing I love around that idea of cycles as well, is to have compassion for ourselves. That's part of the human journey, isn't it?
Yeah,
That we do kind of get off track, but then we can come back, we
yeah,
can come home to ourselves. But part of the journey is that we lose it all.
yeah. That
That's what
isn't,
we do.
and I think that's some Celtic wisdom that you shared with me as well, right? And I'm definitely going to get the language wrong here, so hopefully you can help keep me on track. But about about failing, about falling off, about imperfection.
Mm.
Actually, that's the kind of the source of greatest humanity.
That sounds great to me, James, what you've just said.
I shouldn't have teed it up as anything else other than my own, should I?
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, because that's what we do, isn't it? And
Yeah,
then to have compassion for ourselves around that and just notice,
yeah.
and then we can come back, yeah. So yeah,
Space, space and compassion. Space
yeah,
and compassion.
space and compassion, yeah. And I love that whole cycles of thinking in spirals,
Mm.
that idea, that you mentioned it there, that we can come back round again.
Yeah.
So could I share one more little quote with you?
Oh, please. Yeah, please, 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 please.
So this is from Marion Woodman. So she says, linearity does not come naturally to me. It kills my imagination. Nothing happens. No bell rings. No moment of here and now. No moment that says yes. Without these, I am not alive. I prefer the pleasure of the journey through the spiral. Relax, enjoy the spiral. If you must miss something on the first round, don't worry. You might pick it up on the second or third or ninth. It doesn't matter. Relax. Timing is everything. If the bell does ring, it will resonate through all the rungs of your spiral. If it doesn't ring, it is the wrong spiral or the wrong time, or there is no bell.
Yeah. Wow.
So
Yeah, I love it.
we
Love it.
can always come back round again.
Yeah, and that I guess that makes me think about the kind of the third part of the kind of the conversation really around leaps of faith. How kind of purpose can take us into the unknown. And I guess, Kerry, from minute one of this conversation, you've been talking about leaps of faith. There was just something maybe intuitively within you that enabled you to just do things you hadn't done before, or go for what felt right. Where over and above those moments that you shared with us already, are there any others where you kind of really feel that leaps of faith have kind of paid off for you?
Yeah. Well, one thing that comes to mind, which felt like a leap of faith at the time, it's about 12 years ago now. I got a really strong feeling that I needed to start sea swimming. Really strong feeling. But I wasn't a sea swimmer, and I couldn't even swim with my face in the water.
Oh, wow.
So and what happened then, I there was a group of swimmers in Donegal where I was living at the time, and at the time there were only kind of serious sea swimmers, so
Yeah, yeah.
there wasn't really dippers so much. So a leap of faith was by myself having a conversation with them, asking if I could join.
Yeah.
And would I have to learn to put my face in the water? So that was a really interesting journey, and of actually learning then to swim with my face in the water and get over the fear of being in the water, and then learning to swim with them.
Yeah.
And in part of that was I remember going into the pool on the first day and like huffing and puffing up and down the pool, and like literally like this, and I just couldn't do it at all. And I remember coming out in tears, actually, because I had this really strong feeling, this is really something I need to do.
Yeah.
And then being very moved because two of the women came over and said, you're going to get this, stick at it. And they give me advice on how to, how to work with this and overcome the fear. And didn't go back to the pool for about 6 weeks. I was like, no, that's it. That's the end of this.
Yeah, yeah,
And then I came across Hero's Journey
yeah,
as a model.
yeah,
And in Hero's Journey, which is that Joseph Campbell's work.
yeah,
And he talks about the call of the soul. So you get this call to action. So like a call, I need to start sea swimming. And then you'll start that, but then you'll get this phase of what he calls going to ground, where
yeah,
you think you can't do it and you give up. And when I read that, I was like, oh, that's where I am. I've just given up, but I can carry on because the
yeah,
cycle continues and
yes,
it's
yeah,
almost like you get back on the horse and then you overcome the fear.
yeah.
So I put the goggles back on, got back in the pool and got there. So that's what comes to mind. And I love that framework that
What has that given you? What, when you talk about, because again, this is like the third reference point of just had this really strong intuitive feeling of action, of activity, of direction. When you look back at certainly the kind of the sea swimming element of that, you can hear that cold and go, that what where did you get that idea, like this compulsion to be in the sea, and then the effort and the commitment and the determination in order to make that happen, all of that had to come from somewhere. So what was it in you that was saying that's important? And as you went through the journey of being able to master yourself, to actually embrace the outcome that you were looking for, what did you learn? What did you understand about yourself, and why sea swimming was important for you?
Well, I think it's back to what David White says about those, the vulnerability, the unending vulnerability of consequences. Because I learned so much about myself in that journey from, trying to keep up with those other swimmers,
Yeah,
instead of actually trusting my own pace and, encountering the fear of, jellyfish and all that kind of stuff. And also then needing other people because we train to do this crossing across the bay
yeah,
and you've got kayakers and your mind tells you because you're looking at the pier, so you want to go for the pier. But if you do that, you're going to end up like a half a kilometre off down the lock. So you need the kayakers to keep you on track. And so it taught me so much. It was, there was just this deep pull that this is just something that I have to do. That's all I can describe it as, really. And then once I got on the journey, I was just on it. It's like,
yeah.
okay,
And I think again, what really speaks to me is this idea that purpose creates a sense of faith and belief in what's possible. You have no idea whether or not you could sea swim, but actually, that's not a reason for not doing it and not going there and not trying.
no, yeah.
Excuse me, I don't know where that came from. So, John, we might need to edit that out.
Hi, John.
There's this sense of faith and belief in that could be possible, and that it's worth the leap of faith. It's worth going into the unknown because of what may be beyond this point of understanding.
Yeah. And then there can be that time where you just feel like you can't do it, you're giving up on this.
Yeah,
And I love that framework in Hero's Journey of, when I feel that now in a process, where I've started on something and then I hit that space of, I can't do this.
yeah,
It's really helpful to think of it in that cycle of, okay, that's just where I am right now. I've gone to ground. This is part of the process. I'm on track.
yeah. So,
Yeah.
Kerry, I think this is a really wonderful moment just to kind of pause and our conversation really, and just kind of reflect on some of the key messages that you've shared here. This powerful sense of intuition and being able to create a level of trust in what that is telling you, and that requiring courage. and actually courage being the source of self-worth for you now. I pay attention to those moments and I pay attention to those feelings because I know there'll be consequences, but I'm ready to own them. And that actually you see and experience all of this in kind of a circular, a cyclical, spiraling kind of nature, and that things are going to come around and that the right timing will present itself. And that within that, there'll be moments of absolute clarity and certainty, and there'll be moments of commitment and faith, and then there'll be moments of absolute terror and flatness and and disconnection.
Absolutely.
But trusting that it'll come back
Yeah.
round again. And so I think for all of those that are listening, hopefully you've just heard a deeply soulful expression of what purpose really is as a felt experience and what it can create for us in a world of deep uncertainty. So Kerry, massive thank you for taking the time to be with us and in this conversation today.
Oh, well, thank you so much, James. An absolute pleasure to talk to you. I could talk to you all day.
Yeah, you and I may get loads out of that because we'd love it, but for everybody else, they might have other stuff to do. So
Definitely.
We'll let them do that. Massive thank you for taking the time to listen to the Excitable Soul podcast. If you are interested in uncovering, understanding, and unleashing your sense of purpose, come and explore our purpose immersion programs at theexcitablesoul.com. We look forward to hearing from you there or being with you on our next episode. Have an incredible day.